It's early February, and that can mean only one thing in the football calendar. Yeah, well, two things. We've got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend, but we also have rookie scouting. Now, my Football Guys colleague Dave Kluge is joining me today to talk about his rookie class scouting, especially running backs, whether Jeremiah Love is the real deal, and who some of his favorite second and third round picks are going to be. And that's next on Dynasty Compass. Welcome to Dynasty Compass. I am your host, Jeff Blaylock, the other Jeff B. from Football Guys. I am thrilled to be joined today by my friend and Football Guys colleague, Dave Kluge. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a fun time of year, kind of still processing what happened throughout the entire season. Not even the entire season, like still have the Super Bowl to look forward to. But yeah, this is a fun time of year to kind of turn that page, start looking forward, getting acclimated with 157 new names. We stay busy over here.
157. So, I like to say that there's no offseason in Dynasty, and you've been the epitome of that lately since you've been scouting through 157 rookies. So I assume that's been what's been keeping you busy. But just in case there was anything else, what have you been up to since the season ended?
That is it right now. We are deep in the rookie weeds. We've got the Dynasty show that we do with the other Jeff B, Jeff Bell, and we actually didn't even do any episodes last week. We kind of did a mini hiatus while we were finishing our scouting reports, but we'll have that out hopefully sometime next week. On top of that, already starting to do 2026 rankings. We'll be publishing those next week on the website as well, polishing up Dynasty rankings. You want to kick your feet up a little bit, but the NFL has just changed so much. It is just a 365-day media machine now. There's always something to talk about.
Yeah, and the rookie guide, too, is coming out, I believe, correct?
It is, yes. That should be out the Monday after the Super Bowl. I always hate saying a date because, delays can pop up. We could have an issue with the website or something that morning. But the idea is to have it out next Monday. And yeah, we've got a new website. We've got some new features added in there. We're doing a range of outcomes rather than just, it's so hard to definitively say, especially this early in the process, like this guy's a starter, this guy's a backup, this guy's a superstar. So what we did this year is kind of painted a range of outcomes picture so that this guy could be anywhere from a special teamer to a Hall of Famer and anywhere in between. There's some guys with narrow ranges of outcomes, some guy with wider ranges of outcomes, but makes it fun to go through all those players and kind of see how we feel about them.
As you're going through that evaluation process, what is it that you are looking for, or how do you go about it? You've got a name, you got somebody you need to do some research on. What's the process for you?
So for me, I get my list of names from Jeff Bell, which is very nice because there is no comprehensive list this time of year. You can't say like, who are the rookies that I should watch? So Jeff, I know he spends so much time going through the, Pro Bowl I'm sorry, not the Pro Bowl, the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and the Hula Bowl and the American Bowl, and then looking at early declares and looking at all these, trying to form as comprehensive of a list as we can get. But when I'm going through and I'm looking at these players, the one thing that I look for is a standout elite trait. Now, people can't be elite at everything. That's just not how it happens. But I think if you've got at least one elite trait, that'll give you an opportunity to crack a rotation. Now, it could just be speed. It could just be pass catching. It could just be that you are great at lowering your shoulder and getting through a defender. But if you have one elite trait, that's enough to get a player drafted. A lot of times we see these guys in college that are kind of good at everything, but don't really have a standout trait. Those are the guys that typically fall by the wayside, end up as practice squad guys. So I'm looking for one guy, or for a guy who has like one thing that can really separate him from all of his peers. And sometimes that's just pure breakaway speed. We've seen that with guys like Keaton Mitchell and Rasheen Ali. Sometimes it's just being a power back. And we saw that last year with Taj Brooks, a guy who got drafted, didn't really find his opportunity. But if you have one trait that can set you apart from everybody else, that's enough to give you opportunity. And then hopefully from there, it can grow into a bigger role.
And is there anything that in particular, one trait is a great way of looking at it. Is there any one in particular that you can look at, or maybe you're looking at a film and you just look at the guy and go, yeah, this guy has it. This is going to be a star if he gets the opportunity.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you just kind of have a feel for. And I wish that I can say like, this is the it factor. And it's just one of those things that when you know it, or when you see it, I should say, you know it. And, Jeremiah Love is the one that kind of jumps out to me from this class, where you just see him do things that you have to like rub your eyes, and it's just like, wait, what? Like, how did he do that? He was here, and then he juked, and then he ended up here. Or, he started this spin move here, and then he ended it 5 yards downfield behind two defenders. He's just doing things that don't look natural to the human eye. And you see that with these guys that have that real it factor. They're just doing things that haven't been seen before. You see those, you see it on social media all the time, where people kind of blur out and take off the names and the numbers and the jerseys, and you're kind of looking at these bubbles of players, but you can like just know who a player is by how they move, because they're such a unique, different type of athlete. I feel like that's what I'm looking for. And we see that with, Jeremiah Love in this class. We saw that with Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw that with Ashton Jinty. There's some guys that when you watch them, they're just doing things on a football field that you haven't ever seen done before.
A minute ago, you talked about the sort of generalists as being people that concern you as not having that kind of an elite trait. Are there any other red flags that you're looking for that say, this one is maybe not as good as the hype, or maybe this one's got a much tougher path to a relevant role?
There's a lot of people that can just kind of do one thing really, really well, and that just doesn't work in the NFL. I think about a guy like Kadarius Toney. Like, he wasn't a guy who could create separation on his own. He wasn't a guy who had the size to be a power back. He was just kind of this gimmicky player in college that they would scheme touches up to where they could get him in space, and he was an electric athlete with the ball in his hands. But NFL teams are way quicker to figure out how to shut those players down than college teams are. So when I'm watching a guy and it's just like, wow, this guy has all of these chunk plays, and then I realize that they're all coming on just like stretch runs to the outside, and this guy like just has enough bend where he can get to the outside, and that's all he can do, but he can't run inside, he can't catch the ball, and he can't generate yards after contact. That's a red flag to me. Or similarly, a guy who's just really good at just like hammering between the tackles, picking up 3 to 4 yards every single time he touches the ball. That's great in college, but that's not going to translate to the NFL. And then when we're looking at wide receivers, can you beat zone and man coverage? Are you able to win deep and in the short areas of the field? I want to see guys that have more versatile traits, just because we see these guys that are limited to one thing that they do really, really well. That often, and I know that might sound like it's contradictory to what I was saying about having an elite trait. I think an elite trait is different than just kind of scheme touches. So I think what I'm getting at here is that's the major like red flag that I look out for, is guys who can't really win on their own. Guys that rely on scheme touches and gimmicky manufactured ways to get the ball in their hand to create.
No, I actually don't see that as being contradictory at all. I mean, I think you've got an elite trait is the sort of thing that can transfer from the college game to the pro game and across a bunch of different offensive schemes and against a bunch of defensive schemes. But if you're a unitasker and you can do one thing, it doesn't really matter what you're elite in. You can only do the one thing, and there are only 53 spots on a roster, and a small fraction of those go to offensive skill players. So if you can't do more than one thing, special teams is kind of the ceiling I would expect to see in your range of players, or permanent bench warmer, or however you've got that range described, but someone down in the red and yellow area that you would not want to be drafting as a dynasty manager.
Exactly. And those guys, they do work well, having them on the scout teams and practice squads and things of that nature. But I think if you want to look for a good NFL prospect, you need to be somebody who can win in a multitude of ways. And then you need to have that one elite trait that helps you stand out from everybody else as well.
I know you've been focusing on running backs, but I'd like to kind of pull back for just a second, if we can, and just talk about this rookie class in general. I mean, there has been a lot of chatter from the analysis, from the analysts, rather, a lot of chatter online that this class, the 2026 class, is relatively weak when you compare to others. And a lot of focus is being placed on the 2027 class, in particular for dynasty managers looking at what to do with their draft picks. So where would you put the 2026 class in relation to some of the other classes in recent years, and perhaps the one coming up in 2027?
I think there's so much comparison to the 2027 class that it makes people feel like it is just, this class is just so bare that there's nothing really in it. But I think when you look back over the last few years, it's kind of middle of the pack. And I think if you look back, 2 years ago, we were so blessed when we saw all of these quarterbacks coming in and just really changing the landscape. And then, of course, we had the draft 3 years ago where we had Gibbs and Bijan and some really high-end talent. So I think that this one really lacks the star power. We got Fernando Mendoza going 101, and as much as we like him and we expect him to be a good real life quarterback, he doesn't necessarily have the skills that we want to see translate to fantasy football. He would need to be a huge stat compiler, throwing for 4,540 touchdowns per year. He doesn't really have that rushing skill set. Even if you look a little bit further down, Ty Simpson, there's a little bit of mobility in his game, but he doesn't have that game-breaking athleticism either. So I think that's the thing missing from this class, especially in Superflex Dynasty leagues, which is what most people are playing nowadays, is we don't have the high-end quarterback talent. But I'm looking at a handful of guys that I expect to be drafted and be very serviceable wide receivers. Jeff Bell has done all of our wide receiver scouting, but just listen to him. Daniel Jeremiah recently came out with his top 50 players, and 11 of his top 50 players were wide receivers. So this doesn't have the quarterbacks, doesn't have the tight ends, the running backs. There's a little bit of depth there, but aside of Jeremiah Love, there isn't really a transcendent talent there. But I think the wide receivers here are going to give us enough depth that it can kind of inject some extra depth into a wide receiver position that feels like it's been lacking over the last couple of years.
It does indeed. And most years when we look at a draft board, we generally, there's consensus that forms around the top 5 guys or 6 guys or 8 guys or somewhere in there. And then from there, it's kind of a crapshoot. Where do you see that cutoff this year? Is it at 2 or 3? Is it down closer to 10? Where would you say is the talent and opportunity and sure-thingedness drop-off point this year in the first round?
And I'm glad you said it, because I think a lot of people are scared to go there, but I think it's 2 in this year's class. You got Jeremiah Love and Fernando Mendoza, and I like a lot of the wide receivers, but I also see them as very, very tight in rankings that, you don't want to trade up to get one of these guys when it comes to Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate. I don't have a strong stance between any of them. I will just sit there at 105 and gladly takes whoever falls into my lap. I don't think that you should be moving up to get into there. So if you want to say that those guys kind of extend that out to a top 5, I suppose you can, but I think that Jeremiah Love and Fernando Mendoza are much safer. I think it's human nature to just want to, every single year, we kind of draw this arbitrary line in the 5 to 8 range, because it's nice and pretty where we can kind of just split the first round in half and you could either move in or out of the first half. But I think if you're really looking to move into a tier where you can get, I don't want to say can't miss, because even can't miss prospects can miss, but it seems like Jeremiah Love and Fernando Mendoza, those are the safe picks. And then once you get past those 2, everybody has some warts in their profile.
So what would your advice be to someone who's got the 103 or the 104 this year, and we assume that neither Mendoza nor Love falls into that position? What would your advice be to that person? And I don't know, there may be someone on this chat right now who has a couple of those picks who might be looking for that kind of an advice.
Yeah, I would say to trade back, which might sound a little bit crazy, but I talked about how there's some depth here. The 11 wide receivers in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. There's also some decent running back depth. So I really like that top 3. You're going to hear about this top 3, I think, between now and the draft, when it's Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon in some sort of an order. But when I look at Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion and then some of the running backs, I got Katrin Allen, Jadarian Price, Jonah Coleman, Nick Singleton, Emmett Johnson, Mike Washington. All are pretty tight in my rankings. So I think that, it's too early in the process, especially now, to have any really, really strong takes on any of these players. If I'm sitting there at 103, 104, 105, and somebody really wants to trade up, I will gladly trade into the back of round 1 if it means that I can acquire future picks, especially in this loaded 2027 class.
We've already mentioned Jeremiah Love a couple of times, and he is, of course, the early consensus RB1. I think he is your RB1 as well, and potentially the Dynasty 101, certainly in 1 QB leagues, and I think even in Superflex, he may be just at that level. But is he really at that level, or are we just thinking that he is at that level because that's where the speculation is right now? We've got to have somebody at the top, and he looks like the guy.
Yes, he is that good. Next question. No, I mean, he is a amazing athlete. And, it's funny. When I was trying to comp him to players, because that's a necessity in our rookie guide, right? We have to have these player comps. And all of the players that I wanted to comp him to are such different players. I'm like, this guy's like a little bit of Jamal Charles, but he's a little bit of Darren McFadden, but he's also a little bit of LaDainian Tomlinson. I mean, he is such a unique player. The contact balance, the power, the speed, the juking ability, the pass catching. I mean, there really isn't anything in his profile that makes me think that he won't be a very good player. And, we always kind of find nits to pick in people's profile, whether it was Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. But when I look at Jeremiah Love, this is a guy I expect to go inside the top 10. I expect him to be an immediate workhorse. He's got the big play upside. He's got the pass catching chops. He's got the size and strength to play near the line or near the goal line as well. So, I think that we're going to be looking at this guy immediately after his rookie season, if not, atop the tier, at least in the same conversation as Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and hopefully Ashton Jeanty gets that boost out of year two as well.
Yeah, certainly we were hoping that for Jeanty. I found it remarkable during the season that several points I looked at his stats. This is Jeanty we're talking about, and he had more yards after contact than he had yards. And the fact that he was able to do that to me is a really strong sign of his talent and capability. If he could just get through the line of scrimmage without being touched, we might be looking at a really electric player. And so it sounds like Love may be kind of in an N=1 sort of universe as a very unique, very elite kind of a talent.
And, I talk about the one elite trait. And when I look at Emmett Johnson and Jonah Coleman and Katrin Allen, Nick Singleton, all these guys have one elite trait. But with Jeremiah Love, it's everything. Like he's got game breaking track speed. He's also a phenomenal pass catcher. I talked about his juking and spinning abilities, his way to avoid contact. But when he can't avoid contact, he also has elite strength. Like I'm sure you remember the touchdown from 2 years ago against Penn State, where he broke 4 tackles from inside the 3-yard line. Yeah. I mean, this guy, however you want him to win, whether it be inside, outside, as a pass catcher, as a rusher, on zone reads, on gap reads, I mean, he can just do it all.
So you mentioned another little group of names there of running backs. So who would be, have you settled on an RB2, or do you have kind of a tier of that next group of guys? And then what's the gap between those guys and Jeremiah Love?
Yeah, so I have a really tight tier after Jeremiah Love. And I think the gap between Jeremiah Love and my next player is bigger than the gap between my RB2 and my RB7. So there is a really tight tier after Jeremiah Love. But my RB2 is Katrin Allen. And he's a guy that I don't think is a lot of people's RB2, which I'll just say at this point, it's early February. Yep. If there's any sort of consensus right now, that's just silly. We are still looking at a very incomplete puzzle here. I think it's silly to dunk on anybody's RB2 or wide receiver 4 or anything like that. Let's just let the process play out. But Katrin Allen was just such a good player at Penn State, ends up leaving Penn State, which has a long history of very good running backs, as their all-time leading rusher. But what really jumped out to me is that last year we saw Drew Aller went down early in the season, and it really changed how defenses played Penn State. They started loading the box. They started, not allowing for these big lanes where Nick Singleton was kind of the flashy player over the last couple of years. When they started doing that, Penn State's offense leaned on Katrin Allen a little bit heavier. Now, he weighed in at the Senior Bowl a little bit smaller than expected. He was listed at 229, weighed in at 220, but his nickname is Fat Man. Like, this is just a big, bulky, thick running back, and he doesn't have the top speed that we really want to see from an elite prospect. And I think that's why some people get nervous about him. But when I see him, I see a player very similar to Nick Chubb, who also, if you remember, didn't have a great 40 time, didn't have the best long speed, but just his ability to minimize losses. Like, he gets hit in the backfield, he turns a 3-yard loss into a no gain. He turns a no gain play into a 3-yard gain. He's got such good footwork, and he's such a decisive player that he knows when to bounce around a defender. He knows when to run through a defender. Just a very sound runner. I see so much Nick Chubb in his game, and Nick Chubb was another guy that, a lot of the people didn't like coming into the draft because of his lack of top end speed. But our Matt Waldman was very much so saying, the speed doesn't really matter here. It's the footwork, it's the patience, it's the ability to press blocks. That's what makes him such a good player. And that's what I see with Katrin Allen right now. He is already a pro level, a pro ready guy who can just step in and immediately handle a 3-down workload.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, a lot of folks are going to do their scouting by looking at stats and looking at the box score. And sometimes these stats are just not that impressive looking because turning a 3-yard loss into no gain shows up on the stats as no gain, even though they actually did a really, really strong job to make something out of nothing. It still statistically was nothing. So as I kind of look at the world for dynasty managers, those are exactly the kind of guys that you want to latch onto, because they're the very guys that your league mates are not going to be that interested in, because the stat box doesn't show the elite stuff like some of the flashier kinds of guys who get those 60-yard runs and then otherwise are hit at the line of scrimmage and fall down.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too. I mean, I talk about this nonstop as we get closer to the combine, but just a reminder, 40-yard dashes do not matter. They're fun, and it's always the thing that everybody tunes in for the combine. But especially with running backs, what you want to look at are the 10-yard splits, the shuttle run. How do they do in tight spaces? How's their lateral agility? That's what I care about more than anything else. And I wouldn't be surprised if Katrin Allen comes out and runs a 4.55 or a 4.6. He might also drop a few pounds and get in the 4.4s. But what I'm going to be watching more than anything is the 10-yard and the shuttle and seeing how he does in those.
Yeah, he's in a bit of a catch-22. If he loses the weight to get faster, he'll be dinged for not having enough weight. If he has the weight that everyone's looking for, he won't be very fast, relatively speaking.
Exactly. Yep. Welcome to the combine, where everybody's just trying to fudge the numbers to do whatever they can to move up an extra half round here and there.
Exactly. So who's next? Who's in that same tier that you've got there, second behind Love?
So I've got Jonah Coleman out of Washington. My player count for him was Doug Baldwin, and I think if you watch him, you'll just immediately understand why. He is a bowling ball, but he is deceptively fast as well. You see these small, kind of stocky guys. They aren't always guys that you'd expect to have burners, but when he gets into the second level, he can kick into that second gear and just pull away from the pack. So another guy with pass-catching chops that I like. I get a little scared off by the smaller running backs sometimes, because we see these guys a lot of times will come in a change of pace role when the defense is beat up, and then they can just rip off a 60, 70, 80-yard touchdown untouched. I want to see guys with translatable skills to the NFL, and I like to look at guys that are 220 plus pounds. Jonah Coleman clears that box. He's got the wiggle for a big guy as well, so he's fallen in as my RB3. After him, Emmett Johnson is another maybe a little bit of a smaller guy, but a guy that proved at Nebraska that he can handle a massive workload. Got one of the biggest workloads in the Big Ten last year. Led the Big Ten in rushing, led the Big Ten in scrimmage yards. So another fun player who can kind of rip off big plays, but also has the size and wiggle between the tackles that I want to see.
And do you see these guys as round one Dynasty rookie draft talents, or are we looking at the top of round two, or where is the appropriate place to try to target these guys?
Yeah, I think, Jeremiah Love is going to be the 101. And then I have done a handful of mock drafts so far with some casual fans, with some analysts, and there is just no consensus at all. So I talk about how tight I think this is, between like the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 7, along with the RB2 to RB7. I don't think that there are any huge stances that you can take on these players right now. So I would say just get your guy. They're the guys that you want at the end of round 1 aren't going to make it back to you at the end of round 2. So I think people get too hung up with trying to play the ADP game, and this guy's ADP is 13th and I'm picking 8th, so I don't want to take him because everyone's going to make fun of me for being a reach here. But if you like Mike Washington and he's going and the middle of round 2, but you've got a late first and you don't have a late second, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a guy like Mike Washington or Casey Concepcion at the end of round 1. So I think that this year we're looking at a cluster that's tight enough that you could just go out and get your guys. I don't think that you have to really be too worried about whether ADP says that they belong inside the top 12 or not.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it also depends on when your rookie draft is scheduled. There are some fire breather leagues that are doing them now, or some have done to do Deviant have done it years ago. Others to wait till at least after the draft when you have a sense of landing spot. I mean, how many of these guys in this 2 to 7 range in the second tier of yours, how many of them do you see as being completely landing spot dependent? And how many of them do you think can transcend and be really solid in a whole bunch of different offensive schemes?
I'm very glad you asked that, because I am not a proud person when it comes to just completely abandoning my priors after the NFL draft. This time of year, I look at kind of building the foundation, right? Like, we want to know everything we can about these players. Where did he come from? Was he a 0-star recruit or was he a 5-star recruit? Was he a walk-on? Was he a team captain? How did he do? How does he win? What are his good traits? What are his bad traits? That's what I'm trying to find out right now. But the reality is that everything that we look at, whether it's college production, combine numbers, where they went in mock drafts, nothing correlates more to fantasy success than draft capital. So right now, I love Katrin Allen, but if Katrin Allen falls into round 7 of the NFL draft,
right,
and that means that every single team deems 6+ times that they don't think he's a good running back, what kind of analyst would I be to say, no, I'm smarter than the entire NFL. I know something that they don't know. Right. Sure, 20 running backs went ahead of him, but he's still my RB2. No, that would be foolish. So I think that after the NFL draft, I make huge swings in my rankings, and I'm not too proud to admit that. I want to soak up as much information as I can about these guys over the next 2-3 months. But when it comes to the NFL draft, I do use that as my guiding light more than anything else.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar to that, in that I do understand the role that draft capital plays. I'm willing to stand on a hill and be there and die on it, but only if Matt Waldman is standing in front of me. He definitely sees things that I don't. I trust him when if he knows something the NFL doesn't know, then that's probably true.
Exactly. Which Nick Chubb was a guy that he liked a lot more than a lot of other people did.
Yeah. Are there any of these top guys that are giving you concerns, that you're seeing a little more one dimensional in terms of their playing style, or is this group of about, from 2 to 7 really kind of all about the same in terms of that? There's not one that's sort of drifting for you toward the bottom of that group.
I would say just, and he does drift towards the bottom of this group for me, which a lot of other people have him as the RB2 or the RB3 I've seen in this class. Nick Singleton scares me a little bit, and I alluded to it earlier, but this year when Drew Aller went down, Nick Singleton really kind of got phased out of the game plan. And to me, that's a huge red flag. But like when the offense is firing on all cylinders, that he can rip off these big plays and he can score on touchdowns. But most of his big plays in 2025 came on special teams, where it was Katrin Allen was the guy who was handling the workload when he was seeing these loaded boxes. So that scares me a little bit. Now, of course, the way that this could work out is that he does what he did in 2022, 2023, 2024, lands on a good offense that allows him to come in as a rotational guy and make big plays. But I do worry a little bit about his ability to shoulder a big workload. If he couldn't run against heavy boxes in college, he's really going to struggle doing that in the NFL. And then you combine that with the broken foot at the Senior Bowl practice, that could end up keeping him out of training camp this year. So I don't want to say that he's a bad prospect. I don't want to knock him whatsoever, but there are a few red flags that, keep him in the RB6 range for me rather than the RB2, RB3 of this class.
Yeah, that broken foot was a really unfortunate injury, because now his fate rests in the speculation of what he might be when he heals from that, as opposed to what he can demonstrate between now and the end of April. So I do feel for him and for any player who winds up in that kind of a situation, because there's so much headlight put on the combine and on these early practices that if you can't do them, you get behind very quickly.
And this comes down to cost. Like if you're watching this show right now in early February and we're talking about Nicholas Singleton, the reality is that a month and a half from now, 2 months from now, when everybody's watching the draft, and he might end up going day 3 because of this broken foot and because of no combine results. Then if he starts falling into like late round 2 of rookie drafts, then he ends up being one of the best deals out there. So it's hard to speculate right now because we don't know where he's going to fall in rookie drafts. There was a lot of talk about him being a top 5, top 6 pick in rookie drafts, and I wasn't crazy about that. But now if the broken foot causes him to fall, you have to realize that draft capital, the lack of combine, that's all going to have an asterisk next to it. And if he's fallen into the middle end of round 2, then he ends up being one of the best values.
Yeah, and I think, too, you bring up something that's really a good point, is that, to me, the key to Dynasty, you need to nail your first-round pick if you can, but to me, the real key to being a consistent winner in Dynasty fantasy football is getting that sort of first-round talent out of those second- and third-round picks that are down below. You mentioned trading down. If you've got kind of a mid-first-round pick this year, it's actually trying to find these guys as that ability to succeed. And so who do you see kind of in that lower round 2, mid round 3 from rookie drafts, day 2, day 3, early day 3 guys in the NFL? Who do you see right now as being folks you might be at this point looking to target with those double picks?
So I've been doing this long enough to know that, once guys start getting a little bit of buzz in late January and early February, that usually just keeps rocket shipping all the way to the NFL draft. And this is kind of one of the hard parts about doing the rookie guide as early as we do, is like 2 guys that I didn't see anybody talking about that I loved were Mike Washington and Adam Randall. And they both started to draw a little bit of buzz since. So I scouted these guys about a month ago, and I said, like, these are dudes. These are guys that I am really excited about. And then both of them went out and ended up having really good senior days. One, they both weigh a ton. We're looking at 223 and 228 pounds. So these are guys that can handle massive workloads. Let me start with Mike Washington, though. Again, I'm big on player comps for some players. Some players it's really tough to do. But when I watched Mike Washington, I was like, I'm watching Matt Forte. He has the same muscular frame. He's got that upright running style. And what Matt Forte did so well when he'd get into the open field, he had the size to run through defenders if he'd want to, but he would kind of do this like almost fake like he was going to take on the contact. And then he was so good at just like ever so slightly evading defenders where he can continue downfield and making big plays where he was minimizing contact instead of taking it on. But he also the strength to get between tackles when he needs to. When I look at Mike Washington, this is a guy who, like I said, 223 pounds, was the fastest player at the Senior Bowl where they're all have the chips on them to track their miles per hour. Just a really fun player. We also saw there wasn't a whole lot of creative usage as a receiver, but they asked him to run a wheel route a lot at Arkansas, and it just consistently would work, where this guy was getting open 20, 30 yards downfield on the sidelines, and he was able to catch the ball every time it would come to him. The other guy is Adam Randall, and this is a really unique story with Adam Randall. He was a wide receiver and quarterback in college, and then he got drafted to Clemson, played wide receiver for his first couple of years and did almost nothing, like couldn't even get on the field, couldn't run routes. And then there was one game where all of their running backs got hurt and they had to lean on Adam Randall in this emergency running back spot. And he looked really good. And that was one of the last games of the year. So going into that next season, they started using him as kind of this spot running back here and there. And it just kind of developed from there where he eventually became Clemson's lead running back. So we've fallen for this wide receiver turned running back transition before, didn't work out with Antonio Gibson. We're still waiting on Tyrone Tracy's story. But this guy is 228 pounds, 6'2", can run crisp routes out of the backfield, but is now starting to develop into a between the tackles runner as well. So when I look at him, I see so much Cordell Patterson in his game, but just a bigger, more polished version of Cordell Patterson. So not sure where he's going to be going in rookie drafts, but he will be a primary target of mine if he's sitting there in round 2 and 3.
Do you think that, we've observed during this past season, even someone who has never really used them before, like Sean McVay, going to multiple tight end sets? So is that changing the role a little bit and the archetype of running backs a little bit, that some of this sort of smaller, faster, scoot through the line, quick talent is being kind of overtaken again by these bigger, more bruising kinds of backs who can be in this everybody at the line of scrimmage, tight box on the other side. Let's see what happens kind of a player.
Absolutely, yeah. And like we see this ebb and flow all the time. I just recently shared something on Twitter, actually, which was I wrote back after week 6, but reshared it again today, that we have seen this change where, we're not seeing slot receivers out there. We're not seeing 11 personnel. We're seeing a lot more jumbo packages. I don't know if that changes too much for the running backs, but, so much of the NFL during the 2010s with Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and all of these guys that just like, everybody was passing for 5,000 yards, it felt like. Yep. And then we saw defenses really change how they played it. And we started seeing defenses playing out of dime and nickel packages where they were pulling linebackers off the field, putting extra D-backs out there, playing this too high shell coverage. And what happened is teams started dinking and dunking their way down the field. And I think Tom Brady was one of the first to do it, but now we're seeing this over Patrick Mahomes over the last few years. And I think the natural evolution from there is, why would I want to dink and dunk my way down the field, throwing the ball to a 190-pound, 5'10" slot receiver when I've got Darnell Washington, my tight end 3, who weighs 315 pounds and can just rumble through an entire defense. So I think that's why we're seeing these tight ends get a little bit more heavily utilized, just because they can do more after the catch. As for running backs, though, I don't know if it makes a huge difference, because whether you're a power back who knows how to read your blockers or whether you're a scat back who likes to get outside, having these bigger jumbo packages on offense, I think it makes it easier for both types of running backs to still succeed.
But I guess, too, and going back to this concept of being kind of a box score scout, you may be impressed by some of the numbers that some of these smaller running backs can get as receivers, playing almost more of that kind of slot role. So it may be we may be approaching that time where you're actually looking for the bigger back with good hands as opposed to the smaller back with good hands at big numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is, if that's what you're looking for, yeah, because you don't see a lot of that, or these like Derrick Henry. That's always been like the big knock on him, is that he isn't a fluid pass catcher. And it seems like you've always got you have to give up the pass catching chops for size. You can kind of have one or the other. And I think that's what makes Adam Randall so unique. And that's why in the guide I comped him to Cordell Patterson, which, got drafted almost 15 years ago, because you just don't see this. These 6'3", 230-pound guys that are able to run routes out of the backfield. It just makes him such a unique player that, I want that on my roster just to see how it shakes out.
I think one of the great things about this time of year, about going up to the combine, is we do start to get to know some of these players as people and some of their stories. you've looked at over 50 running backs. Are there any whose stories just come to you and say, man, I hope this guy makes it. I'd love to see him on a 53-man roster. Maybe he doesn't have the elite talent. Maybe he is more of a generalist, but just the story by itself is like, I really like this guy. I'd love to see him succeed.
Yeah, I love Jamari Taylor's story. And a lot of people know Jamari Taylor played at Virginia last year, but it's the story coming up to it. Like almost every guy who gets drafted in the NFL is somebody who was a 3 or 4 star recruit coming out of high school. Jamari Taylor was a 0-star recruit. He didn't get any buzz whatsoever coming out of high school. He walked on at a school that I'd never even heard of before, North Carolina Central University. He walked on and found a role as a special teamer. Year 2, he started to get a handful of touches here and there. By year 3, he took over the backfield, ended up transferring to Virginia, where he took over the backfield as well, over 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns last year. And he is one of those generalists, as we say. I comped him to James Robinson in the guide, who, if you remember, was an undrafted free agent, but could catch the ball well, could run between the tackles, had the speed to break off long runs here and there. That's exactly what Jamari Taylor does. He doesn't have one extreme standout trait, which is what I like to see in a guy, but he is just a good story, an easy player to root for, and a guy that I think, if given the opportunity, has shown through his path through college that he is resilient, he can persevere through the face of adversity, and I think that there's a chance for him, if given the opportunity, that he can be an above average starter.
Yeah. It's about opportunity, right? I mean, we can see guys who are undrafted or 7th round picks. We can see a Bill Krosky Merritt, who we all were buzzed about early. He goes in the 7th round. We kind of lose some interest in him, but because of the circumstances that happened in front of him, he winds up having a dynasty relevant role that now has him talked about as a redraft draft pick and a highly sought after dynasty pick. So even these guys who you might get turned off by that draft capital, depending on your depth size, if you've got a really deep bench, or you've got a taxi squad on your dynasty team, there's a lot of guys to just have some patience with, aren't there?
Absolutely. And we see this all the time. These guys that don't do anything their rookie season. And then, slowly, I think Chuba Hubbard was a prospect that I really like. And it took 3 years of him being in the league to finally feel some sort of vindication. But yeah, you absolutely want to exercise patience with these guys. I think, the major red flag for me is that if you are an elite prospect, like a first round pick, one of these sorts of guys, and you struggle your rookie season, I'll take a little bit more notice of that. But if you're a day 3 guy and you don't do much as a rookie, you just want to hold on to these guys for going into year 2 for the same reason that you drafted them before their rookie season.
Yeah, their skill set doesn't just go away because they've been on the bench or on the practice squad for a season or 2.
Exactly. And this is the year, Kendre Miller, all those years of holding on to him. It's finally going to work out for me this year.
It's Kendre season, finally. As a TCU Horned Frog, I've been holding on to him for a long time. So I'm picking him up as people have dropped him. And I'm like, this is it. If he could,
I think he's one of those guys that I have just on almost every IR slot in almost every dynasty league right now.
Yeah, IR. Yes. He is an IR warrior for me as well. Dave, this has been a real pleasure. I know we've got the Football Guys Rookie Guide coming out very soon, hopefully right after the Super Bowl. There will be several more editions of that as we gather more intel on the rookies. Anything else on that project or anything else you've been working on for Football Guys that you'd like to talk about?
Nope, just staying busy over here at Football Guys, footballguys.com. It is as comprehensive as a website can get, whether you're looking for DFS, Dynasty, rookie, redraft, salary cap, like you name it, we've got it. And Jeff, of course, you're over here at Football Guys as well. I'm not telling you anything that you aren't already aware of, but just still every single day feel so blessed to be a part of this company. I've been a subscriber since 2006, so I've been reading Joe Ryan's emails forever. Just getting to work with Sig and Waldman and all the other guys over here is such a blessing. So just footballguys.com, where you can find just about everything you're looking for.
All right, Dave Kluge, thanks so much for being my guest today, and thank you all for watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Please please subscribe. If you're on Apple in particular, please drop a review in for us. That would be very, very helpful right now. And again, thanks so much for tuning in. We are not here unless you are here, and we'll see you next week on Dynasty Compass.